Hello and welcome. Both sides create fears around the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, whether there is some incident about to happen, while the fighting along the front line is continuing. Ukraine can show some successes, while the Russians also claim some. Heavy fighting is still ongoing though, and we'll have a lot of information about the mobilization, political back areas, etc. So let's just dive in and get it over with. On the front north of the Seversky Donetsk, the fighting is continuing. The Russians are reportedly attacking at Novoselivske, Novodiane, Dnipro, which is down here. And in the Serebryansk forest, I found claims by Riba that in Novoselivske they gained some ground, they advanced their positions. No confirmation of that yet. The Russians themselves say the Ukrainians attack at Novoselivske, at Novodiane, and Yampolivka, which is here. They are also saying they attack at Torske and at Dnipro. I cannot see any change in any actual proven change in the control of territory. So as of now, we just don't know. South of the Seversky Donetsk is reported that the Russians attacked at Vesele. Also no success here. And the Ukrainians are still attacking around Bakhmut. Strelkov was saying that there are successes north of Bakhmut, the situation is critical. The situation is increasingly getting worse. Where exactly he didn't say. The Russians themselves did 9 counterattacks into the Ukrainian advances at Hirorivka, Bodanivka, Yahitne, and Ivanivske, which is like here. Yahitne is here. And Ivanivske is here. So the Russians did some counterattacks. No proven successes though. 9 attacks though were reported. Gray zone is the pro-Russian, pro-Wagner group. They are saying the situation is getting worse and worse by the day. Right now, the Ukrainians are attacking heavily here at Orikhovo, Vasilivka in the ridge line. Should they succeed with this and advance over it, then Berkhivka will have to be given up, and that would unblock, as they say it. So that would basically give the Ukrainians access to the road into Bakhmut from the north. They are also publishing a map which is fairly interesting. Now we have to adjust it because it's not north-south line. I don't know why you would do that, but this is here. Down here is Avdiivka, which is here. So we have to see it's basically lying on the side, more or less. And according to them, if we look here, they actually the outskirts of Bakhmut themselves in the south are already contested. So according to them, this area here, just orient, this area here is already contested by the Ukrainians. Doesn't prove anything. Basically, gray areas is what they call where no side has solid positions anymore. So, which is the kind of the no man's land between the both of them. We have more information around the fighting for Klishchiivka. Klishchiivka is supposedly one of the strong points in the south of the Russian defense around Bakhmut. Should it fall, then the Russians fear a collapse in the south in the defense of the south, as they will have to retreat quite a bit, and none of the positions is as dominating as that ridge line here. We have here a map of Riba showing the fighting, and we can see according to them, and again, like we have to see from which side it comes. Riba is pro-Russian, so if they admit that the ridge line is already under attack, then it shows us that the Ukrainians are actually there already. They are saying that the fighting here is Klishchiivka is still under Russian control, but it's increasingly fighting. The fighting is creeping closer, and the ridge lines are under attack, and the Ukrainians are entering the ridge line. That doesn't mean they have defeated the Russians there yet, but it might happen within the next few hours. The same is coming here from Venkor. They are also saying that the Ukrainians are pushing into that strong position, and they are in danger of losing it. So as of now, Klishchiivka, at least when I finished the research, Klishchiivka hasn't fallen yet, but it might within the next few hours. It might fall into Ukrainian hands. Hanna Maliar is saying, and that is fairly interesting, she's saying that both sides are fighting. The situation escalated and there's heavy fighting between both sides. And the interesting part is both sides are fighting for the initiative. Now, that would imply that the Russian forces are strong enough that they might take over the initiative, which is an indication of additional reinforcements having been sent there, which is what most likely is the goal of the Ukrainian offensive there. They want to draw in as many Russians there as possible. Whether they liberate Bakhmut or not is a secondary target. The threat of liberation of Bakhmut is supposed to draw in Russian reinforcements that can no longer help on any other point of the front line at all. Further south in Avdiivka, we have reports of additional fighting. By the way, I don't see the Ukrainians having permanently crossed the canal yet. They have tried to, and there was artillery shelling on their positions, but I'm not completely sure they have managed to cross the canal at Kurdyumivka. Further south at Avdiivka, fighting is continuing. The Ukrainians have likely liberated some tiny positions in the direction of Opytne, but we are talking about 50-100 meters fighting in the tree lines here, so no breakthrough of any kind. The Russians themselves are supposedly attacking in the south of Avdiivka, where exactly, whether it's in direction of Pervomaiske, Vodiane or something, I haven't found out, but there's some fighting here, as well as Marinka. Not much of a surprise, so fighting is still going on there. If we move over to the border of the oblast, we have the report from Wargonzo. They have managed to reach Priutne. This is kind of important because according to the maps, we would see that Priutne is still a sizable chunk behind the front line. But according to Vorgonzo, the Ukrainians have reached it. Obviously, we still don't know from the north, from the west, what does he mean by reach. But that is basically a confirmation of Ukrainian successes in the direction of Priutne. There was also a Russian counterattack in the direction of Rivnopil. That has apparently failed, and the Ukrainians are claiming they advanced up to 2 kilometers close to the border. That might maybe be the advance towards Priutne. We see that's like from here, from the gray area to Priutne would be 4 kilometers, so it's probably possible that it was in here. But we don't have any details where that supposed advance was and where we don't have image proof. So can't really say much there. That is solid information. If we go further to the west, to Orikhovo, the area of Orikhovo, the Ukrainians have reached Robotyne, almost at least. We have some image proof here. Now it's geolocalized. Video of them being shelled here, which was posted by Wargonzo, and it's identified. Here's Robotyne, and it's identified up here, and I measured it, so they are exactly a mile away, 1.6 kilometers from Robotyne, I think it's pronounced. So somewhere up here, they have advanced a little further, like I said in the situational picture yesterday, where the Russians claimed that they made them run. That doesn't seem to be the case, but that was basically an admission that the Ukrainians had reached that point at that moment. In the area of Vasilivka, we don't have many big news. There's just continued fighting from Piatichatki towards the direction of Sherebianki, but I cannot there is no movement of the front lines that came to my attention. The bridgehead over the Dnipro, the Russian Ministry of Defense claimed that they pushed it in, that they recaptured everything, and the Ukrainians are gone now. They turned this into a very big drama, into a very big event, into a big victory, which would imply that they take the threat of an invasion they're serious, that they are seriously concerned that the Ukrainians might cross the Dnipro in force, but they're already being told, it's already being shown that they are liars, at least by other channels. We have here two majors, Dva Mayors. They are saying that the fighting at the Antonivsky Bridge is still going on and the Ukrainians are still pushing in personnel. And we have the same here from Riba. I think I need to turn off my camera for a moment so you can see it well. We see here that they consider this being contested, but the central area, if I don't read the colors wrong, the central area should be captured by Ukraine. So according to Riba, Ukraine is still fully under the Antonivsky Bridge. Whether they have returned or not is unclear, because I think they said, if I remember correctly, that the Ukrainians returned. But what we do have now is the confirmation by the Russians themselves that the Ukrainians are still on this side of the Dnipro. They are still having a small bridgehead, even though it has to be put into perspective, as there's still a roughly 100-meter wide river in between them and the rest of the Russian occupied territory. There was a video I cannot show you, where Russians try to cross the Dnipro. I think it was crossing the Dnipro or at another point, and they get bombed by a drone. One of them dies at that point, and the other 3 try to desperately restart the engine of the boat and then get attacked by Ukrainian soldiers and killed in the fighting. That has led to an outcry by the Russian side, because there are like commercial companies selling boats and the soldiers don't have any on the front line. So there is an initiative now forming to amend that problem. And here, for instance, we have now the demand. I think it's already confirmed that Dagestan, for instance, will sell boats it captured from smugglers, not from poachers. It will send them towards the Dnipro, as the Russians understand that they need to give their soldiers better boats to allow them to not be killed in an event like this. Generally, when we talk about the overall situation, we have the Serhiy Cherevati, who is the speaker of the Eastern Forces. He said the Russians have 120,000 men between Kupiansk and Crimean, so more or less along that line. On that line alone are 120,000 Russian soldiers. And when we think about Hanna Malyar saying that the Russians are fighting for the initiative in Bakhmut, that would imply that strong forces have been sent there and that they are strong enough that the Russians think they can recapture the initiative there, which in general, I guess, should be a good news for the Ukrainian side, as this means they fix sizable Russian forces there. We have a picture here from Telegram, which is showing a storm shadow, and supposedly that was shot down here. And here again, while it is shown to be supposedly shot down, I can't really identify if it was a failure, but I'll just take it for face value. According to this, even here Ribar is admitting that it's very hard to intercept because of the low flight profile and the material that are used in it. So it has less radar signature than the Russians would wish for. However, though, they managed to increasingly destroy more of them. That's at least what they are claiming. The secretary of the Ukrainian National Security and Defense Council, Oleksiy Danilov, said on the 4th of July that Ukraine is concentrating to destroy Russian manpower, Russian material, especially artillery, fuel depots, supply depots, and air defense. We have a picture showing basically what is going to happen here. First, we see how apparently the Ukrainians spotted a lot of missiles and weaponry lying in an abandoned complex in Marinka, and later they shelled it. They hit it with, I think, supposedly two HIMARS missiles, and everything blew up, as you might see in the background. I'll just leave it running while I continue. That then again, like all of this shows that the Ukrainians try to do an attritional battle now, with the Russians trying to weaken their positions as far as possible to make sure that the further stages of their counteroffensive will be more successful than the initial ones, where they try to just push through with heavy weaponry. And you can see everything blowing up in the background and the secondary explosions. You see the vast amount of ammunition that was destroyed there. On the 3rd of July, Admiral Bob Bauer, I think he's Danish, he's from NATO, said that Ukraine is doing the right thing right now by going slowly, as it's facing massive, much bigger minefields that are much bigger than initially anticipated, and the fortifications and all of this just takes its time. Generally, in the overall situation, we can say that Ukraine needs to compensate for the lack of an air campaign, as they are not willing and unable to compensate with the mass of men by simply pushing them through the Russian dominance in air power and in artillery. So what they're trying to do now is take out more and more step by step what is opposing them and slowly creep forward, which would be an indication that we should expect that offensive to continue, as basically all observers, including the Russian ones, are saying the Ukrainians still have massive reserves left. Not even close to everything is being committed, so the Ukrainians can still put up a lot of additional fight. We have news from or things about the nuclear power plant. At least when I finished the research, nothing has happened yet, while both sides were basically for a week telling that the other is about to blow it up or plans some attempt. Yesterday, Attrition, a resistance group, Tatar resistance group, said that vans that measure radiation are being reported in the Russian occupied territories, basically driving around there. The Ukrainian side handed out iodine pills. So both sides were basically creating like the other an image that like the other one is about to blow up the nuclear power plants. Now the Ukrainians said they have seen items that look like explosives, and that's the important part. From what I see, they initially said it looks like explosives, whereas many medias have turned it into the Ukrainians claim they mined them already. So the Ukrainians say they watched something that looks like explosives on the roofs of the reactors 3 and 4 here in Hodar. But we have an article here from Reuters that goes into more details, like the Russians, for instance, say that in the night of the 5th, I guess from today until tomorrow, there's supposed to be an attack with drones and long-range weapons on the nuclear power plants by Ukraine. Whereas the Ukrainian side is obviously in thinking that the Russians, or claiming that the Russians want to do something. But this article says that if detonated, about the explosive devices, they would not damage the reactors, but create an image of shelling from the Ukrainian side. So that might actually be a reason why there might be explosives on the roof, but we will have to see simply by observing. As of now, it seems unlikely that either side is going to initiate a serious nuclear incident, as I don't see any side of it benefiting from it more than the other. Whether some soldiers get radiation poisoning, as long as they are able to keep fighting for a while, probably won't matter to either side. Neither side will give up just because there is some nuclear pollution. So I don't see a huge benefit for either, unless one side, unless Russia manages to stop Western support because of the, in quotation mark, irresponsible Ukrainian behavior, or obviously if Ukraine manages to pull in NATO in some ways, should they say the Russians did it. So we really don't know much. From a direct standpoint on the ground, it doesn't make much sense. The only thing there that would make some sense is an impression on the international community, either to diminish support for Ukraine or to increase it. But whether that's enough to pollute the whole area, we will simply have to see. From the Crimea, we have information that they are in trouble with the traffic over the bridge, but the absurd thing is that's not because they're in so much need of supply, probably they are, but also because there are so many vacation goers from Russia that want to go on vacation on the Crimean Peninsula now on their summer vacation, that the roads are completely clogged. That's why the ferries are in action, and supposedly even 2 landing ships from the Black Sea's fleet are going to help transport trucks and cars over the Kerch Strait. We have some information about troop generation. Supposedly Iran, like I read it in several points, but nothing official yet, but it seems like Iran is sending material and personnel to build a drone factory in Tatarstan for Russia. So Russia will produce likely Shahid drones there. We also have now an image from the camp where Wagner is supposed to be in Belarusia. That was taken by some locals. We see them being set up here and bunks being created for them to sleep on. Wagner's now after I lately, I think last or last situation report, I can't remember, told you that Wagner is continuing its recruitment. The news now is that they actually stopped, supposedly for 1 month, but I guess they got the message that there might not be money for them anymore. But the claim is it's only going to be stopped for a month until Wagner has fully moved to Belarus. We have an interesting article here from Riba, again, pro-Russian. And you might have seen this thing and you might remember it, that you've seen it, which was ridiculed all over the internet. I think I'm pretty sure I said it in the English too, but on my German channel I said that I don't see it that big of an issue unless they start using it as an IFV in attacks. For me, it was obvious that this is simply meant to make mobile available air defense systems likely to simplify the drones, which are having a sizable impact. And anything that is big enough, that is powerful enough to take down a drone, when you make it mobile, when you have it available, you don't need to redeploy other resources. Kind of makes sense, and Russia should have enough MTLBs. That's the chassis here, and those are fairly old naval air defense systems that were apparently in storage. And the Riba is saying that basically they are producing more of this now for this very same reason, simply as mobile drone defense systems, and we'll see a Ukrainian one later as well. There is a picture now of a Russian pickup. It's using the UB-23 rocket pods that are meant for the Air Force, for helicopters and planes. It's using the S5 rockets. They have the pod itself has a weight of 138 kilos. If it's loaded with 32 of the missiles, the range is 3 to 4 kilometers when shot. And it can carry a lot of different warheads, heat, HE, and flechette. The interesting thing is, though, while it's being ridiculed again, we'll have to see how they are going to employ it. Don't forget that the Russian helicopters and Sukhoi 25s are using rocket pods like this, often S8, not S5, but basically rocket pods like this to fling missiles over the front line in a ballistic arc. This is much cheaper. Involves much less risk to highly trained personnel by the Air Force, to expensive equipment. If it's just about roughly gaining the angle and then firing it off, I don't see a big issue, unless of course they handle it like it was handled here. Which is from Syria, and it shows the issue of using a missile system from an unarmored platform. Well, it can turn out a little unpleasant in this regard. And we have a video here, additional T-55s on the way, easily recognizable as the fume extractor is at the front of the barrel. There could be some T-54s among it as well. I haven't checked in detail, but it's more or less the same tank. They are being deployed. The Russians are saying they're using them as artillery pieces, as assault guns. And as far as I remember, I have actually not seen them used in a regular tank role, apart from that vehicle-borne IED role. Usually we haven't seen them being used on the front line itself. Russia has 100mm high explosive rounds available, and Iran has a sizable amount and a fairly modern round, so it makes kind of sense if you have the platforms for it. There are also claims that they are being used as pillboxes with just one crew inside. The armor is strong enough to withstand an autocannon, to withstand smaller weaponry, so I guess why not? The ridicule will only have to be justified as soon as they are using them as an offensive tank like they do with the 62, with the T-62, where it is absolutely justified, as Russia is basically drawing out tanks from Nikita Khrushchev's area. We have, from the political sphere, we have some information. Russia 1 had a segment about Wagner where it claimed that the effectiveness of Wagner was exaggerated. In fact, the Russian armed forces were much, much better. Now we see that the Russian state media is working on destroying the reputation of Wagner, obviously, as now the issues are getting bigger. We have claims that Belarus, or reports that Belarus, even the government with Lukashenko himself, are involved in the deportation of Ukrainian children into Belarus this time. So supposedly Belarus is participating in the deportation, or you could say theft of children. So Russians, of course, claim it's all for humanitarian reasons, etc., and they are trying to find relatives if they have lost their parents, and they claim that it wasn't adoption, the usual thing after the international outcry. But apparently, Belarus is involved in this as well. We have here a Ukrainian government source, and we have ABC News also saying that Lukashenko was personally involved. The New York Times is talking about the extension of the surveillance state in Russia, including things like now using means to track conversations on encrypted data files. Not much of a surprise here that Russia is increasing its police state during times like this. Russia is now considering to have GROM, its anti-drug special force of the interior minister, to become a part of the Rosgvardia. This shows that Russia tries to consolidate its non-military forces in the Rosgvardia to make them more effective against rebellions, as a clear result of the Wagner military uprising that we've seen short time ago. And finally, we have more about this. The reports, there's an article according to which Prigozhin was given 10 billion rubles, that's roughly 110 million US dollars in cash, 5 gold bars and hundreds of thousands of US dollars that were taken from him. So they were initially his, and in context of the uprising, they took it from him, but apparently as part of the deal, he got his property back, even though we said in the last situation report that his media empire and his catering business are being dismantled as of now. When it comes to international support, we have some more information. There was an article on a Ukrainian website, I think it's run by the government, showing this here about Merkavas, and the interesting part is, no, we don't have it here. I see it. This is clearly Cyprus, the flag of Cyprus, and in front of a Merkava. Now, that Cypriot soldiers would be in Israel to see Merkavas could be an exchange, but it's more likely that it's in context of what was initially reported, that the Russians the Israelis are going to sell old Merkava 2 and 3 to allow for additional tanks to be deployed, to be sent to Ukraine. And Cyprus has T-80U and UK tanks, so they would be perfectly fitting into their systems. They have the maintenance for it. They have the knowledge with it. It would fit into the Ukrainian army, but obviously Cyprus would have to replace them. Nothing is official yet, and the interesting part here is that the article where this was from was deleted. The pictures are no longer available there. So while I show you the picture, there is at least a small piece of doubt that we have to have towards this picture, because why would it have been deleted? Unless maybe they found out it was actually fake. There could be some claims of copyrights as well. We don't really know. But just don't take it as 100% true yet. There might be a small fraction that it doesn't turn out in the end that this is just some trolls, some rumors gaining their own initiative, starting their own speed, basically gaining speed. It seems likely that this is true. It seems likely that Cyprus is getting Merkava, and as the Israeli media said, it needs US permission. It seems almost impossible to imagine that the US would give permission of the sale of tanks without making sure that Ukraine gets some tanks out of it. And we are talking about 80 to 90 tanks, if I remember correctly. So a sizable amount that would be given to Ukraine, and tanks where they don't need extra logistics. In this regard, it would be a perfect deal for Ukraine. But so far, it's not official yet, and there is still a small sliver of doubt whether all of this is actually true or there might be some wrong things. We now have images here from the Ukrainians on advancing in the direction of Robotine. We see here, what we saw here were the 2 Leopard 2 tanks that are the R version by the Finnish government, that were by the Finns, that were converted as mine clearing tanks. And by the way, interesting, as some were wondering, here we saw some trenches. We even see is it called chicken wire in English? but we see regular barbed wire as well as normal fencing. Interesting too that the Russians are using this, but we see them here passing wrecked equipment, whereas those two might actually still look fairly decent. This was taken here a while ago, so we've seen the losses and we talked about them here on the situation reports, and you could see the three Leopard 2Rs that were 3 out of 6 that were given to Ukraine from Finland, and that was I think Büffel, like a German ARV that was also used for mine clearing, but that one is probably not recoverable. These two, though, look in a decent shape, to be honest. So I think it's a decent possibility that they are actually still operable, that they could be taken out and repaired and be put back into service. And we have more images like this. We see them here from another perspective. We see, I think it should probably be the same, even though that is some browning, so there might have been fire in this, not completely sure. And I think it should be the same. Let's quickly check that. We have those two here. Is that in the background here? I think it's the third one, even though there is no trees next to them whatsoever. Yeah, there is another one here. Now let's quickly check. Yeah, could be this one, even though it feels like it's completely crushed. Yeah, I think it was here because we don't see trees here as well. So this is a little disheartening for the Ukrainian side, as this one seems highly unlikely that it can be recovered. It clearly has burn marks on it, so they might take some spare parts off of it, but it's probably not going to be back in service. We also have a video. Usually the observing community is always mocking the Russians for introducing cope cages. And yeah, so to cope with the Ukrainian Javelin, and we see an M109 by the Ukrainians having its own cope cage. Now, obviously, this one is against against Lancet drones, loitering munitions, to protect it from it. But we can also see that if the Ukrainians use it, apparently there is some use to it after all, even though obviously it's a difference whether it's meant for Javelin or for drones. It's just in my mind, an interesting picture that we see the Ukrainians doing basically the same as well. And we were talking about improvised anti-drone weapons. What we have here is kind of a Mad Max creation out of, I don't even know how many, 8 or something, AK-74s. I think it should be regular ones and Ms, maybe some Ns, I'm not completely sure. And that should be 45 round magazines. So what do we have here? 3, 6, I think it's 6 of them. So an improvised anti-drone weapon, whether you're able to hit with it is probably a different question, but it's set up here in this as well. We have a picture here of the Sukhoi 24 adapter that's being used to fire the Storm Shadows. So an interesting picture here to see how it was made possible, that as obviously the Storm Shadow it's not possible to directly connect it to the Sukhoi 24 because the two aren't compatible, but with this adapter it can be carried and it can receive the launch order from the plane after it after it has its target being programmed in on the ground. And bad news for Switzerland. The fact that they cause problems delivering weapons, delivering ammunition in times of crisis is now starting to make governments rethink their purchasing policies, as obviously weapons you need in war. That's what they're actually made for. And if your supplier in a case of war says, nope, you're not going to get anything because we're neutral, then you maybe should buy somewhere else. And the Dutch are now doing exactly this. They are saying they don't want to buy weapons from the Swiss anymore. Obviously, not only is this going to be important for the future, but it might be meant to blackmail, to pressure Switzerland to do more for Ukraine. As Switzerland is currently the state-run Swiss defense company has, I think, 96 Leopard 1 tanks that aren't even Swiss. They were bought from, as far as I know, Italy for spare parts to make money, to make a profit with it. And now Switzerland is refusing to hand over those tanks for Ukraine, which is obviously upsetting quite a lot of European companies. And we have an interesting picture here how you can solve jam inside of a mortar tube. I just read a comment by somebody saying, we learned that a little different, but I guess war is a different time. He just hits it and it fires. That's it already from me for now. If you enjoyed this situation report, please hit the thumbs up button, leave a comment for the algorithm. What do you think is going to happen with the nuclear power plant? Is there something going to happen? And what would be the reason for it? That can lead to interesting discussions, and it really helps with the algorithm. And if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. This channel is only possible because of the support from viewers like you. So if you like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. Thank you very much to everyone already supporting this channel. That's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.